The first gunshot split the morning air as Maeve Sullivan ducked behind the weathered fence post of her small ranch house. Her hands trembled, but her aim remained steady as she peered through the rifle sights at the three riders approaching through the dawn mist. The year was 1876, and in this remote corner of the Wyoming territory, the law was whatever you could enforce with your own two hands. "That's far enough," she called out, her voice carrying across the frost-covered ground. "This is private property." The lead rider slowed his horse, a tall buckskin that snorted plumes of steam into the cold air. His companions halted beside him, their faces obscured by the shadow of their wide-brimmed hats. "We don't mean no trouble, madam," the man called back, raising his hands slightly to show they were empty. "Just looking for work and a hot meal if you can spare it." Maeve hesitated, the rifle still braced against her shoulder. 3 years she'd been on this land alone, ever since the influenza had taken her husband and infant son within days of each other. 3 years of working the land herself, fighting off rustlers, and keeping the small herd of cattle alive through brutal winters. 3 years of speaking to no one but her livestock and the occasional traveling merchant. "There's no work here," she replied, her voice hard-edged from disuse. "And my food's my own." The lead rider dismounted slowly, careful to keep his hands visible. As he stepped forward, the rising sun caught his features, a strong jawline weathered by sun and wind, eyes the color of a summer sky, and a respectful demeanor that gave her pause. "Name's Elijah Blackwood, madam," he said, removing his hat to reveal dark hair streaked with premature silver at the temples. "These are my brothers, Joseph and Samuel. We've been riding for 3 days straight, fleeing trouble in Cheyenne. We're not looking to cause any. Just need a day's rest before moving on." Maeve studied the men. They didn't look like outlaws, though appearances could be deceiving. The one called Elijah met her gaze without flinching, and something in those steady eyes made her rifle barrel lower slightly. "What kind of trouble?" she demanded. "The kind where a man gets blamed for something he didn't do," Elijah replied evenly. "A banker was robbed and shot. They're saying it was me because I had an argument with him the day before, but I was 10 miles away when it happened." Maeve hesitated. She'd learned to trust her instincts out here, and something told her this man was speaking the truth. Still, caution had kept her alive this long. "Your brothers can sleep in the barn," she finally said. "You can repair my corral fence to earn your keep. It's been damaged since the last storm." A ghost of a smile crossed Elijah's face. "Yes, madam. Thank you kindly." As the men led their horses toward the barn, Maeve watched Elijah's straight back and confident stride. It had been so long since she'd had human company. The sound of voices already felt foreign in her ears. She told herself it was just for one night, just until they moved on. She couldn't afford to trust strangers in this unforgiving land. But as she turned back to her modest home, she couldn't ignore the peculiar feeling in her chest, something like relief mixing with apprehension. The silence that had been her only companion for 3 years would be broken, if only for a day. Inside her small kitchen, Maeve mechanically stoked the cook stove and set about making a larger breakfast than usual. Her hands moved through the familiar motions while her mind wandered to the 3 men in her barn, particularly the one with those honest blue eyes. By midday, Elijah had already repaired half the damaged corral fence. Maeve watched from the porch as he worked, his movements efficient and skilled. His brothers were repairing a leak in the barn roof that she'd been meaning to fix for months. When she brought out a jug of water, Elijah paused, wiping sweat from his brow despite the cool autumn air. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing strong forearms marked with old scars. "You've done this kind of work before," she observed, handing him the water. He drank deeply before answering. "Grew up on a ranch outside of Denver. My pa taught us everything about working the land before he passed." "What brings you this far north?" Maeve asked, maintaining a safe distance between them. Elijah studied her for a moment. "Life has a way of pushing a man in directions he never planned to go. After Pa died, the bank took our land. We've been drifting ever since, taking work where we can find it." He gestured to the land around them. "You've got a nice spread here. Must be hard managing it alone." Maeve stiffened. "I manage just fine." "I can see that," he said without a hint of condescension. "It's impressive. Most men couldn't do what you've done here." She wasn't used to compliments, and the unexpected words made her cheeks warm. "My husband Thomas and I started this place together. After he, after I lost him, there wasn't anywhere else for me to go. So I stayed. I'm sorry for your loss, Elijah said softly. Maeve nodded curtly, uncomfortable with the sympathy in his eyes. The fence should be finished by sundown. I'll have supper ready by then. As she turned to leave, Elijah called after her. Mrs. Sullivan? She paused. Just Maeve is fine. Maeve, he corrected, and the sound of her name in his deep voice sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. Thank you for taking a chance on us. Not everyone would. She didn't know how to respond to that, so she simply nodded again and returned to the house, aware of his gaze following her until she closed the door behind her. That evening, the four of them sat around Maeve's small table eating stew and cornbread. The brothers were respectful, complimenting her cooking and maintaining polite conversation. It was the first time in years that all four chairs at her table had been filled, and despite her wariness, Maeve found herself enjoying the company. Samuel, the youngest of the brothers, entertained them with stories from their travels, while Joseph, more reserved, occasionally added details his brother exaggerated. Elijah mostly listened, his eyes often drifting to Maeve when he thought she wasn't looking. So how long have you been on your own here? Samuel asked, helping himself to more stew. Going on 3 years now, Maeve replied, surprised at how easily the words came. It was Thomas's dream to have our own place. After the war, we came west like so many others. Had 5 good years before the sickness took him and our boy. A hush fell over the table. Joseph murmured a sympathetic word, while Samuel looked down at his plate. But it was Elijah's quiet gaze that caught and held her, not pity in his eyes, but a deep understanding that made her throat tighten. Life can be cruel, he said simply, but you've honored his memory by keeping his dream alive. That takes courage. Before Maeve could respond, the sound of approaching horses broke the moment. All 3 men tensed, hands moving instinctively toward their guns. You expecting company? Elijah asked, already on his feet. Maeve shook her head, reaching for her rifle propped by the door. No one comes here. Elijah motioned for his brothers to take positions at the windows while he moved to Maeve's side. How many head of cattle you running? 23, she answered, understanding immediately. Rustlers? Could be. Or it could be the men looking for us. His expression was grim as he peered through the window. For riders, heavily armed. This is my home, Maeve said firmly. I won't be driven from it. Elijah nodded. No one's asking you to leave, Maeve. But if it's the law from Cheyenne, I need you to know we didn't do what they're accusing us of. She studied his face in the dim lamplight, searching for any sign of deception. Finding none, she made her decision. Then we'll face them together. The riders pulled up in front of the house, their horses kicking up dust in the fading light. Maeve recognized one of them, Frank Wilson, a notorious troublemaker who tried to buy her land for pennies after Thomas died. Sullivan, Wilson called out. We know you're harboring fugitives. Send them out, and we won't burn this place to the ground. Maeve stepped onto the porch, rifle ready but not aimed. These men are my hired hands, Wilson. Whatever business you think you have with them can wait until morning. Wilson spat on the ground. Those men are wanted for murder, woman. Step aside. They're not murderers, Maeve replied firmly. And you're trespassing on my property. We've got papers from the sheriff in Cheyenne. Another man called out, waving a document. You're 50 miles outside of Cheyenne jurisdiction, Elijah said, stepping up beside Maeve. And Frank Wilson is no lawman. He's a hired gun for the Western Union Bank. Wilson's face twisted with anger. Blackwood, you're coming with us one way or another. Dead or alive makes no difference to me. Maeve felt rather than saw Elijah tense beside her. What's this really about, Wilson? She demanded. Stay out of this, Sullivan. It's not your concern. You made it my concern when you rode onto my land, she shot back. The standoff stretched for several tense seconds before Wilson nodded to his men. They spread out, taking positions around the house. Last chance, Wilson called. Come peaceful, or we start shooting. There are 4 of us and 4 of you. Joseph called from the window. Those aren't odds I'd bet on, Wilson. Wilson laughed, an ugly sound in the gathering darkness. I like those odds just fine. The first shot came from one of Wilson's men, splintering the wood near Maeve's head. Elijah yanked her down as gunfire erupted from both sides. The night exploded with muzzle flashes and the acrid smell of gunpowder. Elijah fired with precision, dropping one of Wilson's men with a shot to the shoulder. Joseph and Samuel provided covering fire from the windows, while Maeve crawled to a better position at the corner of the porch. "Wilson," she shouted during a brief lull. "My nearest neighbor is the McKinsey Ranch 5 miles east. They'll have heard the shooting by now." This was a bluff. The McKenzies had moved out months ago, but Wilson wouldn't know that. "You're outnumbered and outgunned," Elijah added. "Ride away while you still can." For a moment, there was silence. Then Wilson's voice came again, strained with fury. "This isn't over, Blackwood. Not by a long shot." They heard the sounds of retreating horses, but remained in their defensive positions until the hoofbeats faded into the distance. "They'll be back," Elijah said grimly as they gathered in the kitchen. "With more men." Maeve looked at the three brothers, her mind racing. "You want to tell me what that was really about? Why is a bank sending hired guns after you instead of proper lawmen?" Elijah exchanged glances with his brothers before sighing deeply. "We found something while working at the Western Union Bank. Documents proving that Wilson and the bank manager, Henry Crawford, have been foreclosing on honest folks' properties based on falsified loans. They've been stealing land all across the territory," Samuel added, "including our family ranch. Crawford caught us with the evidence," Joseph continued. "Next thing we knew, he was shot dead, and we were being blamed for it. Wilson must have done it himself and used us as scapegoats," Elijah concluded. "We've been running ever since, trying to stay alive long enough to clear our names." Maeve absorbed this information, pieces falling into place. Wilson had tried to pressure her into selling multiple times. Now she understood why he was so interested in her modest ranch. "Where are these documents now?" she asked. Elijah reached into his vest and withdrew a folded packet of papers. "Right here. But without Crawford's confession, it's our word against Wilson's. And he's got money and influence we don't." Maeve studied the documents, recognizing several names of neighboring ranchers who had mysteriously lost their land over the past year. Among them was the deed to the Blackwood family ranch outside Denver, foreclosed on terms that couldn't possibly have been legal. "Tomorrow morning, you three ride for Fort Laramie," she decided. "There's an Army captain there, James Porter, who was a friend of my husband's. He's honest and has no love for the banks. He'll make sure these papers get to the territorial governor." "What about you?" Elijah asked, concern etched on his face. "I'll stay and delay Wilson if he comes back. He won't harm me. He needs me alive to sign over my land." "Absolutely not," Elijah said firmly. "I won't leave you here alone to face those men." "This isn't your fight," Maeve insisted. "It became my fight when Wilson shot at you," Elijah replied, his blue eyes intense. "Joseph and Samuel can take the documents to Fort Laramie. I'm staying here." Maeve opened her mouth to argue but stopped when she saw the determination in his expression. Part of her wanted to insist she could handle Wilson alone. She'd been handling everything alone for 3 years. But another part, a part she'd thought long buried, felt a flicker of relief at not having to face this threat by herself. "Fine," she conceded, "but we do this my way." That night, as Joseph and Samuel prepared for their dawn departure, Maeve found Elijah on the porch, staring at the stars. "You should be resting," she said, joining him at the railing. "Too much on my mind," he replied, his profile silver in the moonlight. They stood in companionable silence for a moment before Maeve spoke again. "Why did you really stay? Your brothers need you more than I do." Elijah turned to face her. "When I saw you standing on this porch defending your home, I saw someone who's been fighting alone for too long. Someone who deserves better." His honesty caught her off guard. "I've gotten used to being alone." "That doesn't mean you have to stay that way." His voice was gentle, almost tender. Maeve looked away, uncomfortable with the emotions his words stirred. "We should both get some sleep. Tomorrow will come early enough." Before sunrise, Joseph and Samuel rode out with the incriminating documents, taking the long way around to avoid Wilson and his men. Maeve watched them go, acutely aware of Elijah standing beside her in the gray dawn light. "They'll make it," he assured her. "They're good men." "I believe you," she replied, and realized she meant it. In the short time she'd known the Blackwood brothers, she'd come to trust them in a way she hadn't trusted anyone since Thomas died. They spent the morning fortifying the house and barn, moving the cattle to the furthest pasture, and preparing for Wilson's return. As they worked side by side, Maeve found herself stealing glances at Elijah, the way his hands moved with sure precision, the quiet competence in everything he did, the occasional smile that transformed his serious face. By midday, there was nothing left to do but wait. They sat on the porch, rifles across their laps, watching the horizon. "Tell me about your husband," Elijah said unexpectedly. Maeve was silent for so long that he began to apologize, but she stopped him. "No, it's all right. Thomas was kind. A dreamer. He saw potential in this land that others missed. He wanted to build something that would last." She smiled sadly. "He was a terrible farmer, though. Nearly starved us that first winter until I took over the planting." Elijah chuckled. "Sounds like my pa. Great with cattle. Couldn't grow a weed if his life depended on it." "What about you?" Maeve asked. "Was there ever someone special?" His expression grew distant. "Once. Her name was Charlotte. We were engaged before the war. I came back different, and well, she wanted the boy who left, not the man who returned." Maeve nodded, understanding all too well how life could change a person. The war changed Thomas too. He had nightmares until the day he died. "The dreams never really stop," Elijah admitted. "But they get less frequent with time." They fell into silence again, but it was comfortable now, a shared understanding between two people who had known loss. Maeve realized with surprise that she felt more at ease with this man she'd known for barely a day than she had with anyone since Thomas. The sound of approaching riders broke the moment. Elijah stood, rifle ready, and Maeve joined him, counting at least 8 men riding hard toward the ranch. "Looks like Wilson brought reinforcements," Elijah observed grimly. "Into the house," Maeve directed. "We've got better cover there." They took their positions at the windows as Wilson and his men surrounded the property. This time, Wilson had brought a wagon with barrels likely filled with kerosene or oil. "Sullivan," Wilson shouted, "this is your last chance. Give up Blackwood and sign over your deed, and you can ride away from here." "And if I refuse?" Maeve called back. "Then we burn everything to the ground." Wilson's face was contorted with rage. "You've got 5 minutes to decide." Elijah moved to Maeve's side. "I could surrender. Give you time to get away." "They'll kill you the moment you step outside," Maeve said firmly. "And I'm not leaving my home." "Maeve," Elijah said softly, his hand gently touching her arm. "This land isn't worth your life." She looked up at him, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. "It's all I have left." "No," he replied, his eyes holding hers. "It's not all you have." Before she could respond, a new sound reached them, horses approaching from the east, many of them moving fast. Wilson heard it too. "What the hell?" he muttered, turning to look. Over the rise came a dozen riders, led by a man in a U.S. Army uniform. Behind him rode Joseph and Samuel Blackwood, alongside several men Maeve recognized as neighboring ranchers who had lost their lands to the bank. "Frank Wilson," the Army officer called out. "You and your men are under arrest by order of the territorial governor." Wilson's face drained of color. "This is a private matter, Captain Porter. You have no jurisdiction here. I have documents proving you and Crawford conspired to defraud homesteaders across 3 counties, Porter replied, his voice carrying across the yard. "And I have witnesses who saw you shoot Crawford when he threatened to confess." One of Wilson's own men suddenly broke ranks, spurring his horse away from the group. Another followed, then a third, until Wilson was left with only 4 companions facing Porter's much larger force. "Damn you, Blackwood!" Wilson screamed, drawing his pistol and firing wildly toward the house. The shot went wide, and before he could fire again, Captain Porter's men had surrounded Wilson and his remaining loyalists, disarming them and binding their hands. Maeve and Elijah emerged from the house as Joseph and Samuel rode up to meet them. "Told you they'd make it," Elijah said, grinning at his brothers. "Barely," Joseph replied. "Wilson's men nearly caught us 10 miles out. Luckily, we ran into the McKenzie brothers who were heading to Fort Laramie themselves." "The McKenzies?" Maeve asked in surprise. "I thought they'd left months ago." "They did," Samuel explained. "They've been gathering evidence against Wilson ever since he forced them off their land. Seems we weren't the only ones with proof of his schemes." Captain Porter approached, tipping his hat to Maeve. "Mrs. Sullivan, Thomas would be proud to see you keeping this place going." "Thank you, Captain," she replied, watching as Wilson and his men were loaded into the wagon they had brought to burn her home. "What will happen to them?" "They'll stand trial in Cheyenne. With the evidence we have, they'll be locked up for a long time." Porter turned to Elijah. Mr. Blackwood, the governor has reviewed your case and cleared you and your brothers of all charges. Furthermore, with Crawford's schemes exposed, all illegally foreclosed properties are to be returned to their rightful owners. Elijah stood straighter, disbelief and hope warring on his face. Our ranch near Denver? Porter nodded. It's yours again, if you want it. The Blackwood brothers exchanged stunned looks before breaking into grins and backslapping each other. Maeve felt a conflicting rush of emotions, happiness for them, but also a hollow feeling at the realization that Elijah would be leaving. As the prisoners were taken away and the neighbors dispersed, Maeve busied herself preparing a celebratory meal. The Blackwood brothers helped, the mood jubilant as they discussed plans for reclaiming their family ranch. It needs a lot of work after sitting empty for so long, Joseph was saying. But by spring, we could have cattle grazing there again. First thing is rebuilding the north fence line, Samuel added enthusiastically. And the well needs to be cleared. Maeve listened, smiling at their excitement while feeling increasingly isolated. She had grown used to solitude, but after these few days of human connection, the prospect of returning to her silent existence seemed unbearably bleak. After supper, Joseph and Samuel announced they were heading to the barn to check on the horses, leaving Maeve and Elijah alone at the table. An awkward silence fell between them. So, Maeve finally said, keeping her voice deliberately light, "When will you leave for Denver?" Elijah studied her face for a long moment before answering. "Joseph and Samuel are leaving tomorrow. They're young, eager to start rebuilding. And you?" Maeve asked, trying to ignore the sudden hammering of her heart. Elijah stood and moved to the window, looking out at the darkening landscape. 3 years ago, when we lost our ranch, I thought I'd never find a place that felt like home again. He turned to face her. Until I came here. Maeve remained seated, afraid to move, afraid to hope. This is a small ranch compared to what you had in Denver. It's not about the size of the land, Maeve. He took a step toward her. It's about finding somewhere you belong. And where do you belong, Elijah Blackwood? She asked softly. He closed the distance between them, kneeling beside her chair so they were eye to eye. I belong wherever you are, if you'll have me. Maeve's breath caught. For 3 years, she had fought every battle alone, faced every storm and season by herself, convinced that her heart had been buried alongside Thomas and their son. But looking into Elijah's eyes, she realized that her heart had merely been dormant, waiting. I've been alone too long, she whispered, the admission costing her more than he could know. Elijah reached up, gently touching her cheek. Then I'll stay, he promised, his voice low and certain. For as long as you want me. Maeve leaned into his touch, tears threatening. I don't know if I remember how to not be alone. We'll figure it out together, he assured her. Day by day, when his lips finally met hers, it felt like coming home after a long, cold journey. Maeve hadn't realized how much she'd missed human touch, human warmth, until Elijah's arms encircled her. She allowed herself to lean into his strength, to accept that perhaps she didn't have to carry every burden by herself anymore. Later that evening, they sat on the porch watching the stars appear one by one in the vast Wyoming sky. Elijah's arm was around her shoulders, and Maeve marveled at how natural it felt, as if they had known each other for years instead of days. Joseph and Samuel will understand, he said, breaking their comfortable silence. They've been trying to get me to settle down somewhere for years. Will they be all right managing the Denver ranch without you? Maeve asked. Elijah nodded. They're more than capable, and we can visit when they need help with the big jobs. He glanced down at her. If you'd want to, that is. I'd like that, she replied, surprising herself with how much she meant it. The thought of traveling, of seeing something beyond the boundaries of her small ranch, was suddenly appealing. I haven't left this place since Thomas died. We don't have to go anywhere until you're ready, he assured her. Maeve smiled up at him. I think I might be ready for a lot of things I wasn't before. The next morning, Joseph and Samuel prepared to depart for Denver. There was no awkwardness in their farewells. Both brothers seemed genuinely happy about Elijah's decision to stay. About time he found someone who can put up with his stubborn hide, Joseph said to Maeve with a wink. Don't let him slack on the chores, Samuel added. He's got a tendency to get lost in his thoughts and forget he promised to fix the chicken coop. I'll keep him in line, Maeve promised, laughing at Elijah's mock offense. As the brothers rode away, Elijah stood beside Maeve, his hand finding hers. "Having second thoughts?" he asked. She shook her head. "No. But it's going to take some getting used to not being alone. We've got time," he replied, squeezing her hand. "All the time in the world." Over the following weeks, they fell into a rhythm together, working the ranch side by side. Elijah brought new ideas and energy to tasks Maeve had been barely maintaining on her own. The cattle were moved to better grazing land, the vegetable garden expanded, and the house received long overdue repairs. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, talking about their pasts, their hopes, and gradually planning a future together. Maeve found herself laughing more than she had in years, the weight of solitude lifting from her shoulders day by day. It wasn't always easy. There were moments when the ghosts of the past seemed to stand between them, when Maeve would retreat into herself, overwhelmed by guilt at finding happiness after Thomas, or when Elijah would wake in the night, plagued by war memories he'd never fully shared with anyone. But they learned to navigate these challenges together, offering comfort without demands, space without abandonment. And in the process, something beautiful and resilient grew between them. Winter came early that year, blanketing the ranch in snow and confining them mostly to the house. They spent the long evenings planning improvements for the spring: a new barn, additional fencing to expand the grazing area, maybe even a few horses to start a small breeding operation. "I've been thinking," Elijah said one night as they sat by the fire, his fingers gently stroking her hair. "Perhaps we should make this arrangement more permanent." Maeve looked up at him, her heart skipping. "What did you have in mind?" He reached into his pocket and withdrew a simple gold band. "This was my mother's. My father gave it to me before he died, said I should save it for when I found the right woman." His eyes, so blue in the firelight, held hers steadily. "I found her, Maeve. If you'll have me." Tears filled her eyes as she looked at the ring. "Are you certain? You barely know me." "I know enough," he said softly. "I know you're strong and brave and stubborn as the day is long. I know you have a kind heart that you try to hide behind those walls you built. I know that when you smile, really smile, it lights up everything around you." He took her hand. "I know that I love you, Maeve Sullivan, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you, if you'll let me." Maeve felt tears spill onto her cheeks. "I never thought I'd feel this way again," she whispered. "After Thomas, I thought that part of me was gone forever. And now?" Elijah asked, his own voice thick with emotion. "Now I know better," she replied, touching his face gently. "Yes, Elijah Blackwood. Yes, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and when he kissed her, Maeve felt as though her heart might burst with happiness. 3 years of loneliness and struggle had led to this moment, this man, this second chance she never expected to find. They were married the following spring, with Joseph and Samuel returning from Denver for the occasion. Captain Porter officiated, and neighbors for miles around came to celebrate, many of them families who had regained their land after Wilson's schemes were exposed. The ranch flourished under their combined care. Elijah's expertise with cattle complemented Maeve's skill with crops, and together they expanded operations beyond what either could have accomplished alone. They added horses, then sheep, and eventually built a new house alongside the original cabin, which became a workshop and storage. Letters came regularly from Denver, where Joseph and Samuel had successfully restored the family ranch to its former prosperity. They visited twice a year, bringing news and supplies, staying for weeks at a time to help with seasonal work and enjoy the family they had become. 5 years after Elijah first rode onto her land, Maeve gave birth to a daughter they named Emma, after Elijah's mother. 2 years later, a son followed, James, in honor of Captain Porter, who had become a dear friend. The children brought a joy to the ranch that neither Maeve nor Elijah had dared to hope for, filling the rooms with laughter and endless questions. On the 10th anniversary of the day they met, Elijah took Maeve to a hilltop overlooking their property. The ranch had grown considerably, new outbuildings dotting the landscape, herds grazing in the distance, orchards beginning to bear fruit along the southern slope. "Remember the first time I saw you?" Elijah asked, his arm around her waist. "Standing on that porch with your rifle, looking like you'd take on the whole world if you had to." Maeve smiled at the memory. "I was terrified. 3 strange men riding up, and me all alone." "You could have sent us away," he said. "Most would have. Something told me to trust you." she replied, leaning against him. Best decision I ever made. Elijah kissed her temple. You told me you'd been alone too long. And you said you'd stay. She turned in his arms to face him. You kept your promise. Always will, he assured her, drawing her close. As the sun set over their land, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Maeve reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From the depths of loneliness to this rich, full life they'd built together. There had been hardships along the way, harsh winters, droughts, illnesses, but they had faced each challenge side by side, stronger together than either had been alone. Later that night, with their children asleep and the house quiet, Maeve and Elijah sat on the porch swing he had built for her birthday years ago. The stars spread across the Wyoming sky like diamonds scattered on black velvet, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of spring flowers. Do you ever regret it? Maeve asked softly. Staying here instead of returning to Denver with your brothers? Elijah's arm tightened around her shoulders. Not for a single moment, he replied without hesitation. Everything I needed, I found right here. He brushed a kiss against her hair. What about you? Do you ever miss being on your own? Maeve considered the question, remembering the woman she had been fiercely independent but desperately lonely. I miss the quiet sometimes, she admitted with a smile. Especially when Emma and James are arguing over whose turn it is to feed the chickens. Elijah chuckled. They've got your stubborn streak, that's for certain. And your sense of justice, she added. Did I tell you Emma made James give back the marbles he won from Billy Thompson? Said he'd been using the chipped one that rolls crooked. That's my girl, Elijah said proudly. They fell silent for a while, the creaking of the swing the only sound besides the distant chorus of night insects. Maeve thought about how far they had come, how much had changed since that fateful morning when a gunshot had announced the arrival of 3 strangers. I used to be afraid, she said suddenly. Not just of outlaws or rustlers or bad weather. I was afraid of letting anyone close again. Afraid of losing someone else I loved. Elijah took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. I know. I was afraid too. Afraid I'd never find a place where I belonged again. And now? She asked, looking up at his face, still handsome despite the new lines at his eyes and the increasing silver in his hair. Now I know that love is worth the risk, he replied, meeting her gaze with the same steady blue eyes that had captured her heart a decade ago. Every single day with you and our children has been worth whatever might come. Maeve reached up to touch his face, marveling at how this man, once a stranger, had become the center of her world. When you rode up that day, I never imagined where it would lead. Life has a way of surprising us, Elijah said, turning to kiss her palm. Usually when we least expect it. As the night deepened around them, Maeve rested her head on his shoulder, content in a way she had once thought impossible. The loneliness that had been her constant companion for those 3 years was now just a distant memory, replaced by a fullness of heart she treasured every day. I love you, Elijah Blackwood, she whispered. His arms enfolded her, strong and secure as they had been from the first time he held her. And I love you, Maeve Blackwood. Yesterday, today, and all our tomorrows. In the quiet Wyoming night, surrounded by the home and family they had built together, Maeve silently thanked whatever twist of fate had brought this man to her door. She had been alone too long, and he had stayed, transforming her solitary existence into a life richer and more beautiful than she could have imagined. And in that moment, as in countless moments before and countless yet to come, it was enough. More than enough. It was everything.